welcome back to this episode of this Healthy Life podcast. I'm so excited for my guest today. I have Dr. Steph Venn-Watson. She is the CEO of C15, and she's also a veterinary epidemiologist, and she has over 80 peer-reviewed scientific publications and over 70 patents. So she's here to share a wealth of knowledge, a little supplement that could be making a big difference in our life. It's a simple fatty acid that we're going to be breaking down, talking about how this affects our health and longevity. So Dr. Steph, thank you so much for joining today. So excited to have you.
Oh, Erica, great to be here.
Awesome. So I'd love for you to start just with a brief intro about yourself and how you got into this space.
Sure, by accident, right? The best things happen by accident, right? Steph, as you had mentioned, Erica, mouthful of a veterinary epidemiologist. And I was recruited by the Navy about 24 years ago now to help continually improve the health and welfare of Navy dolphins. Which is amazing. And, while doing that, I was brought in to help analyze tons of data, over 60 years of data that had accumulated on this amazing population of about 100 bottlenose dolphins that they'd cared for, right, for over half a century. So from an epidemiologist perspective, it was this dream. So as I was brought in, we realized a couple of things. One, wonderfully, Navy dolphins live a whole lot longer than dolphins in the wild. So dolphins in the wild live to about 20 years old. Dolphins at the Navy are living into their 40s and 50s, with 2 dolphins this year turning 60 years old.
Wow, that's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
That's so cool.
So while I was there, as the Navy was getting this growing population of older dolphins, we were finding that about 1 in 3 of the dolphins were developing aging-associated conditions that are going to sound super familiar, right? Like insulin resistance and high cholesterol and glucose, fatty liver disease, and even the full chronic inflammation, even the full suite of changes consistent with Alzheimer's, which we just published a couple of months ago. So we were able to use this advanced technology called metabolomics to be able to look at their serum throughout their entire lifetime, as well, that was archived, as well as their all fish diet, to see which small molecules predicted the healthy aging dolphins. We thought it would be omega-3s because all they eat are fish. And instead it was C15, this, a saturated fat I'd never even heard of.
Yeah. So let's break that down. Let's just dive right in. What is C15 and, why is this fat so important?
Yeah. I love the fact that you used dive in.
I know, right? No pun intended.
Look at that. So what we found, what we did from there is, as far as what C15 is an odd chain saturated fatty acid. So that was another big surprise, right? That here we had a dietary saturated fat associated with better health. We then moved pure C15 into the lab. All of this funded by the Office of Naval Research, which is amazing. And we were then able to do 8 studies over 3 years. And at the end of that work, we published in Nature Scientific Reports that C15 is not only a beneficial and active saturated fatty acid, but that it was meeting these rare criteria of being an essential fatty acid, the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in over 90 years since the omegas.
Wow. Yeah. So how is it different? I mean, you mentioned like omegas, right? That's the one that everyone keeps hearing is like, oh, it's so beneficial for your health and, inflammation and all these things. And I think, there's a lot of problems with it, right? Like it oxidizes very easily. You have to be getting the right kind of sources. So what makes this different from, say, an omega fat?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head. So I would think of omegas and C15 as kind of a yin and yang. So they're different fatty acids. There's one omega-3 and one omega-6 that are essential. So we do need them in our cells and to stay healthy. We don't seem to have much of a problem getting enough of it in our diet and through available methods. And so they help to make our cell membrane flexible. Like you said, they, their structure is made to be like they're oils at room temperature. And that's because they have lots of double bonds in their structure. And those double bonds serve as hinge points, which make it flexible. But just like you were saying, Erica, it also makes, those are weak points that oxygen can attack. And that's why polyunsaturated fatty acids, omega-3s, can go rancid when exposed to oxygen. So C15 is the opposite. So it's the yang. If you have the yin of the omegas, you have the yang of C15. And C15 is a stable fatty acid, has no double bonds. And so it is highly resistant to lipid peroxidation. And it has a lot of different roles that we've learned. But one of the key ones is very simple. It's a stable fatty acid that readily integrates into our cell membranes, which then help make our cells stable and resilient against age-related breakdown. And we're finding there's a critical threshold that if we don't have enough C15 in that cell membrane, that cell can actually become fragile and induce a whole new form of cell death.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, so what about like dietary sources of C15? Do we not get this in our diet, or are there any dietary sources that we can be kind of eating more of in order to get the adequate amount, or is this something that we should be supplementing with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's evidence of C15 deficiencies that have arisen since maybe as early as the 1980s, which coincided with when we removed our major source of C15, which is dairy fat. 1977, Congress released recommendations. It's kind of like thinking Congress released nutrition recommendations.
I know, so crazy, right?
Anyway. And these are recommendations for all Americans. That's what the title called. And so they said all Americans shall reduce their intake of all saturated fats, primarily by decreasing your intake of whole dairy fat and butter. So there are bad saturated fatty acids, what's called even chain saturated fats like C16 and C18, that are pro-inflammatory. They are associated with a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and liver disease. But we threw the baby out with the bathwater because those are primary sources of C15. So since then, what we have described in a paper, Metabolites, we published last year, and obviously talk about in the book, the longevity nutrient, is that there's gaining evidence of nutritional C15 deficiencies. So that means, this is a long answer to your question, we can probably fix the deficiency issue, right, which is present in as many as 1 in 3 of us, by just getting back to drinking whole fat milk and eating butter, especially for our kids. Because, we've moved to almond milk and oat milks, and those don't have C15 in them. We also know that if cows eat grass, they have twice as much C15 in their fat than cows that eat corn. So there are things that we can be doing industry-wide and with nutritional guidelines that I think can help fix the nutritional deficiency part. So food is a good way to do that. So high quality dairy fats that are whole and come from cows, sheep, or goats that eat grass. In Sardinia, there are actually studies done showing that if a cow or a goat or sheep eats high altitude grass, they have even higher C15.
Wow.
So people in the mountainous regions of Sardinia, this high longevity zone, they have 2 to 3 times higher C15 levels as us. So there are ways to get those C15 levels. We can also eat fiber. And by eating fiber, inulin and fiber feeds microbes in our gut that can also make some levels of C15, not a lot, but every amount counts. So that would be high quality dairy sources and fiber.
Okay.
Good ways to use for C15.
You answered one of my next questions, because I was going to ask, I was like, are there certain populations or demographics, like in France, right? Like they have a high abundance of like butter and saturated fat in their diet. And honestly, they're probably one of the healthiest people on the planet, right? And no one knows why. I'm like, I think it's pretty obvious why. There's a few things I can notice, but that's interesting. Like if like certain cultures and demographics that are already eating some of these higher fat dairy from high quality sources. Obviously, you don't want factory farm dairy, but
Right.
getting that source, and it's interesting the correlation there.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So trying to let's get back to that. And then when working with the Navy, so the dolphins were, because they don't eat ice cream and butter.
I was going to say, I was like, how are the dolphins getting their C15?
So
what kind of diet are they on?
Very special Navy, top
Sounds
secret
tasty.
Navy diet. The dolphins, so the dolphins get their C15 from specific types of fish. And so we learned not all fish, some fish had C15, others did not. Importantly, it was in the skin and the heads of the fish, which we typically don't eat. But there are cultures, right, of people who do eat whole fish. And that could be even like sardines and anchovies, or in Asian cultures, like the person at the person at the table that you honor gets
eats the head.
Yeah. So now we realize, that's because we want them to get C15. So with the dolphins, they get it from skin and heads, but the Navy was finding it harder and harder to find fish that had high C15 in it, in part because the waters are warming, and fish have less fat than they used to have. So they then challenged us, again, with the purpose of helping the dolphins, which is awesome. Right? They challenged us years ago to say, can you develop a pure, bioavailable, free fatty acid C15 ingredient that we could then use to supplement the dolphin's diet? And so that we did that, again, all funded by Office of Naval Research. And as this was happening, all of a sudden, all these studies started coming out, Erica, showing that just like we showed in dolphins, people with higher C15 had a lower risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease, certain types of cancers. So then, and as we did these studies in the lab, it became very clear that there was a clear parallel between dolphins and humans as large brain, long lived mammals. So while we initially developed the supplement per instructions by the Navy for the dolphins, it became a wonderful spin out benefit for humans too.
That's very cool. Awesome. And much easier to just take a supplement instead of trying to get it all through diet too, right? Like sometimes I think people just are like, just give me the pill that will make it work. But it sounds like this is actually like a pill that does make a difference. So it's always nice when it's a supplement, something your body needs. So
it is. It's good. And you get a known reliable amount. And then there are a couple interesting studies that have come out showing, and these were mouse studies, so they come with a caveat, but show that when mice are fed a high-fat diet that includes C15 in it, their C15 levels actually go down. And so, it was for the people who were doing the study, and they were trying to figure it out. And their hypothesis is that if you are eating like C15 in food, that it's competing with a lot of other, like much higher levels. So if you look at milk fat, only 1% of milk fat has C15 in it. Over 40% of that milk fat are pro-inflammatory fatty acids. So it's like C15 is like a little kid in a really busy subway station, and it's all the big ones that get onto the subway, and the kid may not make it on.
So it's a very small amount that you're trying to get through some of these dietary sources.
That's right.
Yeah. And then, all right, so these cultures that have more C15 in their diet, let's talk about longevity a little bit. So they're living longer, right? There's some of the studies like in these blue zones and things like that are being studied, and everyone's like, why are they living longer? So it sounds like this could be a core piece of this. Do you see this in like other cultures too that have been studied kind of in these blue zones, right? Like I know I think it's certain Eskimo populations that eat obviously a very high fat diet, right? Because their sources are mostly from seafood and things like that. Are you seeing this across the board in other populations that have kind of these high fat fish diets? Or what's like a diet from a culture that's having high levels of C15 that surprised you?
Yeah, the Eskimo population is a great example. So, and again, this is before they moved to the kind of Western diet, right? So it's like, that like Inuits that had, that ate and they had a high marine mammal diet. So we're not saying go eat a bunch of marine mammals, but those marine mammals, they had that fat has lots of C15 in it. So they've been able to get, and it's not the one and only explanation for longevity. Obviously, being able to eat minimal, calories, to, not have too many calories, to be exercise, be active, they're social, they have wonderful community structures. All of those things are huge contributors to longevity. But interestingly, with C15, what we've found is it serves really at the heart of what's called the cell membrane pacemaker theory of aging. And back in 2005, A.J. Holbert wanted to answer the question of how does a human live longer than a mouse? Because we're mammals and we have hearts and livers and eyes and brains and
all these complex things.
Right? And all these studies on longevity, right, are being done on mice, worms, and flies. And Holbert took a whole other approach, which is like, wait, nature's already figured out longevity. Like, so if we can explain how a human lives longer than a mouse, then we could tap into that. And so what he showed was that he created a linear, correlation showing from short-lived all the way up to the longest-lived mammals. And he showed that the more stable the fatty acids in the cell membranes, the lower their lipid peroxidation levels and the longer the species lived. So it's what evolution has used as a tool to enable longevity. So now we're sitting at the heart of it. If C15 does exactly that, stabilizes cell membranes, thanks to, there's now over 100 peer-reviewed studies on C15. And now we know that C15 not only does that with regard to longevity, but it's also, tapping into the longevity regulating pathway. It activates AMPK and inhibits mTOR. Right now we're talking metformin and rapamycin mechanisms. It hits 6 different hallmarks of aging, of reversing how we age at the cellular level. There's evidence that it slows our aging rate through indices, red blood cell indices. So it has what we have 7 must-haves of a longevity nutrient: a geroprotector, a molecule that will effectively slow the rate at which we age to stem the onset of the diseases that kill us. Which that just all means that we can live healthier longer.
Right. Because it's like, you don't want to just live longer, right? You want to make sure that you're healthy and enjoying yourself and able-bodied, because it's like, you can live forever, but if you're bedbound or not having a good quality of life, what's the point, right? So I think it's important to make sure that you're incorporating both aspects of it if you are trying to live longer.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because, when we first, started having these conversations about longevity, Erica, there were, and especially with women, like fellow women, they would be like, I don't want longevity. Like the first thing that came to mind is exactly what you described. And it's like, no, thank you. But if you're going to give me something for healthy aging, yes, please. So we're trying to democratize longevity, that term, so that it's something that everybody has the right to live a long and healthy life. And let's focus our efforts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely about quality of life, for whatever time you're here, right?
That is right. Exactly.
Awesome. And then, so let's talk a little bit about C15 again. So is there a test that you can do to measure your current levels of C15 and kind of monitor as you're taking or supplementing with it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what's great about C15 is that before we even knew that it had benefits, it had been studied, it had been measured for decades as a biomarker for how much dairy fat we were eating.
Wow.
so that's how reliable, that's how important dairy fat is.
Okay.
In most cultures, is you'll look back at studies from 20 years ago, and it'll say biomarker of dairy fat, was used to show that dairy fat is good for you. And the biomarker is C15. They weren't really thinking that C15 itself may be what's attributing to the good health.
Something in the dairy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the good news there is that a standardized test has been around for a long time. So if you get a fatty acid panel, or you provide it, right, then chance that you do have to check and make sure that C15 is included in that test, because it's not always. But yeah, it's using the exact same methods that you measure omega-3, omega-6.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. So that makes it easy. And then, so when you're starting C15, what's kind of the timeline of like what you can experience? Like, do you start to notice changes in how you're feeling, or, energy or joint health, like fairly quickly, or is it something that you don't really notice so immediately, but as you kind of start getting older and aging, you're like, oh, maybe I'm not aging as quickly. So what does it kind of look like or feel like to be on C15?
Right. So the studies were all about the latter part,
Yeah.
right? It was and I shouldn't say wait for a long time. It was more like you would, benefits were expected to be seen, like lower cholesterol, lower inflammation, lower glucose, better liver health. All of the studies supported that this what would happen within 3 to 6 months. And then there have been 2 clinical trials with C15, both randomized and controlled, showing that when people took C15 and got above a critical threshold, which we've defined as getting above of basically not being deficient in C15, and that's above 5 micrograms per mil, then people saw the benefits of lower liver enzymes, improved red blood cell health, better gut microbiome, and lower LDL cholesterol. So those were the things we were expecting, Erica. Like, okay, yeah, just as we have predicted, we understand the mechanisms and all that. What was surprising and what the dolphins couldn't tell us was that there were mechanisms of C15 that help us feel better quite quickly. So half of our customers with Fatty 15 report feeling benefits within 2 weeks, and 70% within 16 weeks. So, and I felt it myself. I thought it was placebo. So I was getting better sleep, calmer mood, good, better, like even energy throughout the day. And I thought, that's not what we studied. That's not
You're like, this is supposed to be part of the results.
Yeah. So it must be like something else. But then we reliably saw customers reporting the exact same benefits. So the science has continued, and what we now know is a couple of things. One, that our body uses C15 not only to do all the great things I just talked about, but it also uses C15 to make a second molecule, a metabolite called pentadecanoyl carnitine.
Oh my gosh, that's a mouthful.
I know, but so we're just going to call it PDC. So PDC is, as we published this back in 2022, I think, and it's the second ever discovered full acting endocannabinoid. So it fully activates CB1 and CB2 receptors that are throughout our brain and body. They're called cannabinoid receptors because they're the receptors that respond to cannabis. But we don't have those receptors for cannabis, right? We didn't evolve millions of years because dogs also have the receptors and dolphins have the receptors. So, and they don't have cannabis. So, so it's like, why?
Maybe they do.
Oh, maybe they do. Yeah, not if maybe they would get drug tested. So the question is, why do we have those receptors? And they're such an important part of what we're now, what's now called the endocannabinoid system. It's like the mother balancer of our mind and body health. So our bodies use an omega-6 called arachidonic acid to make the first discovered full-acting endocannabinoid. And so it's not surprising that now we have found another fatty acid, right, which is C15, makes another molecule that, again, fully activates these receptors. So that will explain why people feel less joint pain, me specifically included, better sleep, calmer mood. We're activating those endocannabinoid receptors or cannabinoid receptors throughout our body. The other thing we just discovered and published 2 months ago was that C15 inhibits certain enzymes that degrade dopamine and endocannabinoids. So by inhibiting these enzymes, that helps support higher, healthier levels of dopamine, which again helps with alertness and happiness, and just the ability with regard to cognitive health. as well as other endocannabinoids. So yeah, multiple shots on goal with C15, which is, it's nice to have the science to explain what people have been reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this sounds like something that you want to just kind of take daily, right? Like you don't need to pulse it, you don't need to take breaks from it. It's something that you can just kind of integrate into your daily life as a daily support.
That's right, and it's a good question, right? So it's not like like a pharmaceutical where it's hard hitting and you've got to like you hit and relax and hit and relax. That is what all of our receptors in our body that it hits are meant to be triggered by this molecule, which is a part of the diet of every infant from birth, right? For every mammal. So this is something we're meant to have, and that it's absolutely safe to take on a routine basis.
Mm-hmm. And then what about if your diet is high in saturated fats or dairies and butters where you're also getting C15? Can you overdo it on C15, or is it something that your body knows how to handle both from dietary and from supplement?
Yeah, it's the latter. So, because I also fall into that category.
Yeah, because I've definitely been doing like a lot more grass-fed dairy like the last few years, especially. Like I took dairy out for a bit just to see if I had issues with it. I was like, I don't think I do. Why am I cutting out this amazing food group? I've got enough stuff I have to cut out. So, and yeah, I think you brought up a good point earlier how like even kids nowadays are just supplementing their milk, like regular grass-fed dairy milk, with like oat milk and almond milk. And that comes with such a host of issues and inflammation and things that I don't think we even have seen the full effects of what's going to come from that, right? With like all the oxalates and the sugar and everything that's in that. So, yeah, it's kind of a shame that dairy has gotten such a bad name, particularly here in the US. I feel like, other countries are definitely still open-minded to it. So I think it's even more important to be conscious of, fatty acids like C15 and making sure that you are incorporating that into your diet.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's you think about it, like milk is nature's perfect food, right? It's the only food that newborns need up until for a long period of time to fully develop. So we should pay attention to nature. So with regard to like the high fat, if you eat a lot of dairy already, I'm in that camp. So I don't shy away from cheeses. I eat my butter. I do, and I have a flat white in the morning, 1 or 2 a day. So I do get, a healthy dose of dairy. Interestingly, I take fatty 15, and I have benefits that I have never experienced from just eating dairy itself. I do think that the combination of the two, I eat my fiber, and I eat high quality dairy. And then on top of with supplementing, right, with C15, that has gotten me to Sardinian C15 levels. So again, there's a test. Most people are around 0.2% of fatty acids in their cell membrane. That's right on the edge of having cellular fragility syndrome of C15 deficiency. So most people are sitting right on that edge. I was at 0.46. So, which is where Sardinians are between 0.4 and 0.6. So I think the combination of the two can actually help you get to optimal levels versus just not deficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're just trying to get it from one source, right?
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so let's talk a little bit about other longevity supplements. And you brought them up. So like metformin's a popular one that people talk about, and rapamycin is the other one, right? That everyone's kind of talking about these days. So what's the mechanism of like how those work and how those are kind of being used from a longevity standpoint versus using something like C15?
Right. So metformin is, it's a great molecule that's been used for a long time to effectively be the first line drug for people with type 2 diabetes. It works by activating AMPK, which then helps our cells take up glucose and helps with glucose control. So it's been used by kabillions of people, this is a scientific term, throughout the world for a long time. So we know that in general, it's a relatively safe, it's a drug, but even so, relatively quite safe. And we know that especially over long periods of time, because it's been on the market for so long and used by so many people, and it's providing a clinically relevant benefit out of the gate. On top of that, it's also because it's activating AMPK, this mechanism, this pathway sits at the heart of the longevity regulating pathway. And so by doing so, there are a lot of downstream benefits that all lead to the end result, which is longevity. It extends longevity in mice, though the results have been a little bit mixed. And some of the human studies have also been not perfectly consistent. So it would probably go into number 2 on the longevity, leaderboard. Number 1, rapamycin, for sure. As far as the research is very compelling. It reliably extends the life of multiple species, including mice. And it works by inhibiting mTOR. And so by doing that, it helps for basically healthy clearing of these zombie cells, right? Cells that should die, but they don't. And so they just sit around in our tissues and wreak havoc and inflammation. And by inhibiting mTOR, it allows those cells to get cleared out and for us to renew and get healthy cells. So that is, in addition, mTOR has this amazing combination of it's anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, antioxidant, antimicrobial, and antifibrotic. So it's has all the things that you would want. The downside of rapamycin is has like a lot of side effects. so it's a very complicated, if you look at the structure of the molecule, it's very complicated and big and messy. So while it does all these wonderful things, it's not what our body was intended to. We haven't evolved to have and use rapamycin. So it comes with a lot of side effects. And there haven't been large scale studies in healthy people taking rapamycin for long periods of time. And to your point earlier, it's more like you take rapamycin, you take a break, because it's just so hard hitting.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the side effects that people can experience from it?
So decreased immunity. So it is actually meant as an immune suppressant for people who have organ transplants.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So some people they'll get mouth sores and they'll get, because it's suppressing the immune system so well that now
things come out.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. The bugs come out. So, and then just stomach upset. It was just a myriad. I think Mayo Clinic had a list of 30 plus.
Wow. It's like you'll live longer if one of the things that comes out doesn't kill you and destroy your life in the meantime, right?
Exactly. That's like a miserable side effect of life. But you'll live longer. So
at that point, you're like, I don't even want to live longer.
I know. I like no things. So then in comparison, C15, like I shared, it activates AMPK, it inhibits mTOR, but not in a hard-hitting druggy way, right? It activates these pathways in the way that these pathways were meant to be activated. It doesn't, like a lot of times you have these receptors and, the molecule binds to the receptor. What the drugs do is they bind and they won't let go, which is why you get these side effects. For C15, it's like it binds and then it leaves. So it's more
gentle in how it's helping your body instead of being such a harsh hit.
That is right. And so it is what our bodies, again, were meant to have as an essential fatty acid. It's just doing the job it's intended to do. So it's able to, have the same mechanisms, longevity enhancing mechanisms as both metformin and rapamycin, but in a much safer, natural way. So we worked with Dr. Nick Shork, who's head of NIH's Longevity Consortium. And Nick was like, oh my God, I think C15 is going to be the holy grail of healthy aging, which is a geroprotector. And so we did a study where we put pure C15 from fatty 15 head to head against rapamycin and metformin. And in an extensive panel done by an independent third party, where you have 12 human cell systems mimicking various disease states, 148 biomarkers, and it was in a dose response fashion, 4 different doses for each of these. So you accumulate this mass amount of data. And what they showed was that C15 had the most cellular benefits, 36, even compared to rapamycin, which was close at 34, and then metformin was in the teens. So it just meant, and then now we know that just like rapamycin, on the good side, right, C15 is anti-inflammatory, anti-fibrotic, anti-cancer, antioxidant, and antimicrobial. All of this demonstrated not only in cell lines, but in vivo as well.
I'm really interested in what you mentioned about it being anti-fibrotic and like anti-cancer and things like that too. So say someone has some sort of like fibrosis or tumors in their body. Have you seen or had any studies or seen any improvement of those going down with the inclusion of C15?
Not in humans. So there have not been human studies
Okay.
with cancer. I know that there are groups that are working on this. But in a mouse model, so first cell line, so human cell cancer lines, studies have shown that C15 is remarkably effective at stopping proliferation of cancer cells. Again, these are in cells, cell lines, right?
Then hopefully something good will come of it though, right? As it continues studying it.
Exactly. And then it was moved into an animal model, into a mouse model with breast cancer. And they showed that they specifically took gemcitabine, which is the first line treatment a lot for breast cancer, and they added C15 to it. And when they added C15, it had significant improvement in stopping the growth and slowing the growth of the tumor, of the cancer tumor. So they have a picture of, the mice in different, mice with not being treated, mice with gemcitabine, mouse with gemcitabine plus C15. And it's remarkable from their pictures. So, and then on the human side, it's more like looking at the studies, numerous studies, especially with colorectal cancer and breast cancer, in which they look at what fatty acids are associated with these types of cancers. And large studies have shown that in some cases, C15 is the only fatty acid that is a predictor of a lower risk of these two types of diseases. So the big question is as our C15 levels have declined, as more and more of us have low C15 levels or C15 deficiencies, is that helping to explain why we're seeing a rise in colorectal cancer?
So many cancers, yeah.
Right. And so versus this is a molecule that's supposed to be sitting in our tissues, in our bodies, ready to help defend against aging-related changes. So
yeah, and especially since we're having less of it in our diet too, right? I feel like there's like this big surge of people are getting cancer younger and getting sicker younger, and it's just like, well, yeah, they probably barely were on dairy, right? And then you demonize like a very important food in our food system that was providing this source of nutrition and protection to us before.
Exactly. So like, let's get it back in the 1990s.
Let's get the cheese out.
Let's get the cheese out. Sounds like a song. Let's get the cheese out. Yeah. I love it.
Awesome. So I want to switch gears a little bit. So you also have a book that you're writing. It's called The Longevity Nutrient. So I'm sure it's covering a lot of what we've talked about on the podcast, but I'd love for you to expand a little bit more on what people can find in the book.
Yeah. So wonderfully, Simon & Schuster reached out, and they had been reading our weekly blog on C15 science, and they said, gosh, we've been reading your blog for a year and this is a book. And so I said, but the science isn't done yet. And they're like, yeah, it's never going to be done. But they're like, how many studies are there? I'm like, well, there are over 100. And they're like, okay, if you ask 10 people, have you heard of C15? How many would say no? I'm like, well, 10. And they're like, okay, so you need to write the book to just get the conversation going. There's enough there that we just can't explain C15 away anymore. So wrote the book and it provides all of the information. So brings together all these studies, these 100 studies, and help, explain the origin story with the dolphins through, understanding how C15 works, its relevance to longevity, how it helps positively impact so much of our bodies from our, with regard to heart disease and fatty liver disease and type 2 diabetes and cancers, where it can play an important role. And then talking about the nutritional deficiency component and saying, gosh, let's make things right again. So that book came out and available now wherever books are sold.
Awesome. Amazing. And then, so we have time for one more question. So if people are just kind of starting to dabble into their longevity journey and, obviously want to make a couple changes, in addition to C15, what are some other core recommendations you have for people embarking on their longevity journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is it's going to sound like a broken record from probably anybody you ask these questions, but it's really, really, really important. And you need to make it doable, right? So exercising is really important for all the reasons that we already know, but we also know it actually helps release C15 from our tissues, and it can increase your C15 levels. So you have another reason to do exercise. Find something that you love to do that makes you mentally happy too. And guess what? It'll be also, chances are, a form of exercise, including resistance training is become huge. Like, we know that when we activate our muscles, we're activating AMPK. And so including any kind of resistance training, do your planks, do the little weights. Like, it doesn't have to be going to a gym.
Something, right? Any kind of movement.
Something is really important. Make sure that you get adequate amount of sleep. Huge. We're learning more and more about how important sleep is to longevity. Directly tied, high quality sleep, to be social. And this means maintaining a sense of community. And that, the part where as you get older, if you are losing that connection to the community, including people who, for example, are losing their hearing, that's a lost sense of connection to community. People who have hearing loss have a higher risk of developing things like Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative diseases. So being able to keep our brain active and ourselves engaged with our community is a huge longevity enabler. So, and the Mediterranean diet holds. It holds pretty darn well under tons and tons of studies. So,
with your dairy.
Yeah, exactly. What's your dairy?
Grass-fed dairy, not just any dairy.
That's right. So you can go to Sardinia, the top of the mountain.
Yes, high altitude grass-fed dairy.
That's right. Which we can't get because it's called pecorino. So pecorino cheese is from that region.
Okay,
right?
Good to know. It's one of my favorites.
There you go. You were already boosting your C15.
I'm going to go eat a piece now. I'm just kidding. Amazing. Well, Dr. Steph, thank you so much for sharing all this information. If people want to find out more about you, what's the best place to find you online?
Yeah, so I'm old. So find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
That's where I'm found. And of course, you can go to fatty15.com to learn all about all the science and everything behind this Navy funded supplement, and then all the science we just talked about, Erica. And there's new publications that are coming out probably every 2 to 4 weeks. There's a new paper which is amazing. So we put that all on discoverc15.com, and that's where you can find it. And you can search papers by indication, by mechanism. It's a good nerdy place to hang out.
Amazing. And we'll link to everything in the show notes as well.
Great.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Erica. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.